So how did we get here? I'm now going to attempt to summarize the entire history of cloud computing in about 2 minutes, so go with me here. With this explanation, I'm going to show you why we think that serverless is the next big leap forward in cloud computing. It's the next kind of 10 times enabler. Okay, so a lot of devs like me don't really like computer hardware. Like, it's cumbersome, it can break. And we've spent decades building layer of abstraction over layer of abstraction in code to get ourselves away from the kind of ugly truth of what's actually running our code underneath that hardware. So first we decided, hey, let's chuck this hardware in a data center somewhere, and someone else can be responsible for making sure it's turned on, connected to the network, and hooray, we no longer had to get out of our chairs. That was awesome. In a data center, hardware is the unit of scale, and the physical hosting environment is abstracted away to be someone else's concern. But provisioning this infrastructure wasn't fun. We had to talk to people, we had to call, we had to email the data center provider, and it could take days to get access to a new machine. And then wham, in 2006, Amazon releases EC2. And suddenly, I can provision machines anywhere in the world using just API calls, programmatically, from the command line, from my web browser. And this was heaven, right? AWS is basically infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as a service was born, and developers around the world cheered. Okay, so that's great. Hats off to the AWS engineers, this is pretty cool. With infrastructure as a service, the operating system is the unit of scale, and the computing hardware is abstracted away to be someone else's concern. But something's always bothered me about that model. I still have to worry about the infrastructure. Yes, I can't find the physical box anymore, but I still have to install the software, I still have to worry about whether it's patched. Has the server run out of disk space? What if it crashes? What if it gets owned? And then a whole bunch of really compelling platform as a service offerings started popping up, like Heroku, like App Harbor, cloud services in Microsoft Azure. And what did PaaS offer that was new? Well, PaaS, or platform as a service, services, take away all of the headaches of configuring a system and patching it. So PaaS services basically say, give me your application's code, and we'll spin up a machine for you, we'll push your code onto it, and then we'll run it. And we'll keep it all patched and running. So with PaaS, the application is now the unit of scale. So every time you need to scale, you spin up another application. And the operating system setup and configuration is abstracted away to be someone else's concern. And this is great because it's one less step that I don't have to perform anymore. But ultimately, there's still a dedicated VM there running my application code. And to scale it, new virtual machines need to be spun up and down. Scaling takes time, and it happens in large steps. An entire virtual machine is either added or taken away. And in many platform as a service offerings, I can still even remote into the virtual machine. And it sits there idle, right? It sits there idling when it's not being used, and it costs me money. Now serverless compute services have come along, and they take it to the next level again. Now I define not my entire application, but a single function. A tiny piece of code with a single purpose, and I give it to this compute service. These functions have small, targeted responsibilities and minimal dependencies. They are completely stateless, and as such, they are really fast to execute, and they scale effortlessly. They can be massively parallelized in response to events. So from my perspective as the developer, there's no server sitting around waiting for requests, idling and costing me money. Of course, there really are servers there sitting around waiting for requests, but I'm not paying for them. I don't have to worry about whether I have enough servers provisioned or if my auto-scaling group is correctly configured. I just don't have those concerns anymore. The compute service executes my tiny function when one of my users actually wants to do something, like if they click a button on the website or they take a photo and upload it from an app. That's the only time that my code runs and that I pay for. With serverless, the function is now the unit of scale, and the language runtime is abstracted away to be someone else's concern. So you might be wondering how containers fit into all of this. What about Docker? Everyone loves Docker, right? Well, containers are essentially a technology. They're not a managed service like all of these. There are managed container services, but containers themselves are a technology, and they enable all of these awesome cloud services. And they are the underlying technologies that serverless compute services and some of the newer PaaS offerings are actually built on top of.